You remember, the divine matrix is very literal. If you say, please let, the divine matrix says, okay, I will let and let and let, because there is no completion, there is no outcome. Does that make sense? So I asked my friend, his name was David. I asked my friend David, I said, if you did not pray for rain just now, what did you do when you closed your eyes? Such a beautiful story. He said, when I closed my eyes, I felt the feeling as if the rain has already happened. He said, I felt the feeling of what it feels like to feel my naked feet in the mud in my pueblo because there has been so much rain. He said, I smelled the smell of what it smells like when the rain falls off of the earthen pueblo walls in our village. And he said, I felt the feeling of what it feels like when I run through the fields of corn and the corn is so high because there's been so much rain. He said, and then I gave thanks of gratitude and appreciation for the rain that has already happened. So he didn't ask for the rain. Now this is interesting. When those practitioners worked on the woman with the cancerous tumor, they did not judge the tumor as right, wrong, good, or bad. They accepted it as it was, and they said, now we're going to make a new reality. When my friend David prayed rain, he did not judge the drought. He said, this drought is our medicine until now, and now we will create new medicine. This is key. Feeling as if it has already happened. Well, I'll tell you the rest of the story. We had lunch that day. By the time I got back onto my property that afternoon, something began to happen that had not happened for a long time. Big black clouds were coming in from the eastern mountains, and it began to rain that afternoon. And it rained that night. It rained the next morning. It rained into the afternoon. By the evening, it had rained so much and the ground was so dry that it began to flood. The roads were flooded. The crops were flooded. The cattle were stranded. And I called my friend David on the phone and I said, this is a mess. I said, what in the world is going on? And he said, that's the part of the prayer the ancestors could never really explain. It's like they could get the rain to begin, but they didn't know how to tell it how much to rain. Now, I cannot prove to you scientifically that David's prayer made that rain happen. I cannot prove scientifically that those practitioners made the tumor disappear. But we can say there's a high correlation, a very high correlation between when they feel the feelings and when the change happens. Okay, now there's more to this story. This is very interesting. Within the last month, I was on tour in Australia with a dear friend, Dr. Bruce Lipton. I know many of you know Bruce Lipton's work. So we were in Australia last month. While we were in Australia, something happened. Look at this. While we were in Australia, Prime Minister John Howard made an announcement. He said, the rivers of Australia have dried up. There is no water. It's all dust. This is a river. This is a riverbed right here. He said there is no water for crops, no water for cattle, no water for irrigation. Australia is in big, big trouble right now. This is the front page of the Australian newspaper. John Howard asked the nation to pray for rain. What happens if you pray for rain? Okay. But there's more to the story. Because Bruce Lipton and I were in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane doing these seminars. And there were people from the government in the audience. The next day, look at what happened. They declared a national rain day. But look at this. The idea was inspired by Greg Braden's book, The Isaiah Effect, in response to Prime Minister John Howard calling on the Australians to pray for rain. Before we left Australia, something began to happen. And it started to rain. And it rained and rained and rained. And we were in Sydney, and it rained so much that the streets were flooded and people were not prepared. But the good news is that it is raining in Australia. Now, I cannot say scientifically that those prayers made that rain happen. But I can say there's a high correlation between the time the prayers happened and when the rain occurred. And this is a connection that our ancestors have told us for hundreds and thousands of years, that we can speak to the elements of the earth. We can speak to our bodies. We can speak to the world around us to create peace. In the early 1980s, Israel and Lebanon were in the first Israeli-Lebanese war, the first war. Researchers from the United States performed an experiment in the Middle East. They trained individuals to feel the feeling as if peace has already happened. This was the very famous experiment. Orme, Johnson, Alexander, Davies, Chandler, Larimore were the authors of the experiment. The experiment was called the International Peace Project in the Middle East. The results of this experiment were so profound that they were published in the Journal of Conflict Resolution, Volume 32, 1988. So the reference is here if you'd like to see this for yourself. Here's what happened. Here's what happened. They trained individuals to go into the war-torn areas and feel the feeling as if peace has already happened. They did not judge the war. They did not judge the Israelis good or bad, or the Palestinians good or bad, or the Lebanese good or bad. There's no judgment, no ego. They simply went in and felt as if the peace has already happened. Just like David felt as if the rain has already happened. Just like the practitioners felt as if the woman is already healed. You see where we're going with this. And what happened was each time the practitioners performed this experience, peace happened in the Middle East. Terrorist activities stopped altogether. Crimes against people declined. Emergency hospital room visits declined. Automobile accidents declined. And when the people stopped their feelings, all of those statistics reversed. Everything went back to where it was. And the researchers said, well, maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe it's a holiday. Maybe it's a full moon. Maybe there are more people on the streets today than yesterday. So they did the experiment again and again and again, and every time the results were the same. In fact, they were able to determine how many people it takes to feel peace for peace to happen in that area. And here's what they found. Very small number. They said if you can get the square root of 1% of your population to feel peace, peace will happen. What does that number look like? Well, let me show you the math. These are very small numbers. The square root of 1% of the population. Okay, if you have a city of 1 million people, here's how the formula works. You take the number of people, total number of people, multiply by 1%, so 1 million times 0.01 gives you the number 10,000. Okay? Now you take the square root of 10,000, 100 people. In a city of 1 million people, if there are 100 people that know the language of peace, they can begin that experience of peace. What does that mean for our planet? Let's look at our planet. Earth has a population a little over 6 billion people now, close to 6.5. If we do the same thing, 1% of 6 billion people is 60 million people. If you take the square root of 60 million people, the number is just under 8,000, 7,746 people. There are 1,000 people in this room. 7 rooms like this can change the world. And that's just the beginning. What happens if many, many people come together on the internet, on the World Wide Web? They coordinate and create that peace. Well, it has happened. It's been done. Princeton University organized the studies, and while the people are feeling peace, all that happens is peace. The problem is that people stop feeling peace and then walk away from the experiment, and everything changes. So this is a very fast day. We have a little bit more I'd like to share and have some experience here in the room. This morning we spoke about the Institute of Heart Math. Their discoveries that every human heart, around the heart, is a field of energy 5 to 8 feet, 2 to 3 meters diameter. And this field of energy can be measured now in ways that make it very useful to us. So this field of energy, if you are within 2 to 3 meters of another person, you are sharing their heart field. So in this room, there are approximately 1,000 people in this room, 1,000 heart fields, but we are all sharing one field in this room. Yes? Does that make sense? Okay. So, the Institute of Heart Math has designed equipment that will help us to measure this field in the room. If we can detect the heart field of one person, because we are all linked, then we are all detecting one another's field. So we have a little experiment that I'd like to do this afternoon. The purpose of this experiment, it will help us to know what kind of feeling in our heart creates the effect in our world. And this is what I'd like to do for the rest of the afternoon. So let me explain a little bit about how this works.